I believe that having an ostomy for IBD patients does help more than getting an ostomy for different conditions. It gives your bowel a break from where the inflammation is. It's a lot of transitioning and practice required with getting an ostomy, but it is totally okay to do anything that you were doing before after surgery with an ostomy. There's nothing that I can't do that I do now that I didn't do before I had an ostomy.
Welcome back to the Talking Shit podcast presented by Colitis Unfiltered. My name is Frank Tabring, and today I have the pleasure of talking to Leah, who got diagnosed with Crohn's at age 9 in a little town called Swansea, Illinois. So Leah, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. So we briefly talked about your journey, but I always like to start these by going into the past, right? Moving on to the present and then into the future. So let's start with the past and tell us about your diagnosis. Tell us how it happened and maybe start with the first symptoms. Whatever happened that you noticed that there was something wrong and how those symptoms then launched to the diagnosis and the rest of your journey.
So I was diagnosed when I was 9. I actually had a bout of food poisoning prior to my diagnosis. I feel that kind of kickstarted some things. I think it sent my immune system into overdrive. And then after that, I was having symptoms of fatigue, bloody diarrhea, just overall, just weight loss, not feeling well. I became very pale. I was brought to the hospital and actually St. Louis Children's. That was actually in Missouri, but we were very close to it. And I was so afraid of the doctors. So they did one test and I was like, I'm never going back. My parents were very nervous to bring me back to the hospital because I made such a fuss of it. And then since we didn't follow up, my dad was in the military at the time and we were actually stationed in the Netherlands. So we left to go to the Netherlands, and due to the stress of being in a new country, new food, new environment, my condition went into overdrive again and I started having my first flare. We had a lot of doctor visits in the Netherlands because I was so tired that I just kind of gave up on going back to the hospital. And that's where I started seeing Dutch doctors that put me on Remicade infusions. And then I was still having some symptoms and needed to do like bowel preps and stuff. So that's when I got my first NG tube as well. The Remicade worked for about 5 weeks, and then my next dose was less and less. I was having still the same symptoms. So we actually went to London at the time to talk to other doctors, get a second opinion. And they were the first ones that brought up surgery as a potential intervention in the future. My parents got nervous. We ended up flying back to the States for a third opinion from military doctors. And in that process, I underwent treatment for 2 weeks, had IVs, had NG2, couldn't eat. I was having endoscopies, colonoscopies. And that eventually led to like a definitive Crohn's diagnosis. And my 8th grade year in middle school, I actually ended up getting my first ostomy due to some of the medication not working. And I went through high school, college, and eventually led to having my large intestine removed when I was 18 after several medications. And I've actually been great ever since.
So this is great. You're feeling amazing. That's what we want, right? But it's definitely been a journey for you. So you touched on a lot of things that I would love to follow up with, but going back to the diagnosis, and I guess in your case, you had sort of almost several diagnoses, right? The going back to maybe the one that stuck in your head the most, or that maybe moved you emotionally the most. How did the doctor break the news to you, and also sort of what went through your mind, not really knowing much about the condition that you had, right?
Yeah, I think being that young, it's really hard to wrap your mind around a diagnosis like that, especially since, going to the bathroom is such a private part of our lives. I hated all the medical procedures that I had to go through, but it was kind of a dramatic and emotional experience of this is what's presented to me, this is what's happening to me. I kind of have to just do what I need to do. I kind of let my parents figure out a lot of it, but it was really just I was hurting. I would tell my parents. The doctors would tell them what to do. I would go in for testing and I would kind of sit with it. And I absolutely did not love it when I was that age, but it was something that I was like, okay, well, it's either this or I feel bad. So it was a lot to take in, but it was something that I was like, okay, like this is, I kind of just accepted as like, this is what life is. This is what it's going to have to be. So a lot of different emotions.
Looking back now, would you potentially argue that it was maybe better for you to be at such a young age because you didn't have that knowledge, right? Or you had your parents more as guides and really helping you out?
Oh, absolutely. I tell people all the time that I am so fortunate that I got diagnosed at a young age. Especially now, I see kids that get diagnoses that bounce back really easily. Kids are way more, I don't know, they're way more moldable to be able to go with the flow at that time because the parents do handle a lot of that stuff. So, yes, I would agree that being diagnosed at such a young age and also getting an ostomy at such a young age was definitely a blessing.
And this leads to my next question. Surgery at a young age, ostomy at a young age. How did you navigate those moments, those years, the teens, right? Such a crucial point, and yet there you are, looking basically a little bit different, feeling a little bit different than others. What was that period like for you, especially also during those crucial teenage years?
I was a loner for most of those years. I tried my best to be social, and I wanted so badly to be normal, but there was times where I just gave in to how my body was feeling, and I would stay home. I missed a lot of dances and school. I missed a lot of, like, hanging out with my friends, but it just took so much out of me that I was like, I can't." And I don't wanna show up and not be present. Even now, like, if I'm not feeling well, I will cancel before I go out and try to bring the mood down. But yeah, during my flares, I wanted to be alone. I was a very suffer in silence kind of person, and I had to just ride it out. There's nothing, it's your body. There's nothing really that you can do. So it was just laying low until I felt better.
Mhm. And your friends, again, because of this young age, were they able to understand what you were going through? Were they able to sort of cope with knowing that you, their friend, is experiencing this? Or was there also a certain distance because of what you were experiencing?
I definitely think there was some people who were kind of like, okay, she's just doing whatever. But at the time when I had my most severe flare and I left the Netherlands, there was a lot of people who knew that I was sick and they cared for me. They sent a lot of like kind of goodbye messages and saying like, "Hey, I hope you feel better in the States." And then when I moved back to the States, there was a lot of people that are like, "What's going on with her?" Because I wasn't super open about it at the time. So I think it was 50-50. Those people who were close to me, I had like one or two friends that I'd be like, "This is what's going on." And then others would kind of know something was going on, but otherwise were kinda like they would continue with their lives as you would. So it was hard to accept that adjustment and know that, like, not everyone's gonna be able to stay with the pace that I'm at. So it was an adjustment in every period.
So you mentioned not being very open about it at that time. Obviously, as humans, we get older, we get wiser. What changed in you that you started opening up about it more? Was it a specific period in your teens? Was it a little bit later? Was it an event? Was it just, you know, getting older, pulling in more experience in life? What was it that helped you transition from being kind of closed off to being so much more open about it today?
It was definitely when I got my first ostomy when I was 13. When after I got my first ostomy, I felt so much better. I shot up in growth. My nutrition got better. I got color back to my face. And since an ostomy, it can be very private, but since it was so open and it was something that made me feel so much better, I was like, "Okay, well, this is on my stomach. It's gonna be seen at some point. Like, I feel so much better. Like, I can do so many things." I joined my middle school and high school dance team, and just from there, I was kinda like, "Well, I feel better. I'm glad I have this. So if anyone wants to know about it, like, that'd be cool because maybe someone else is going through the same thing that I'm going through, and surgery is very daunting." So I started being very open about it when I started feeling better after my first ostomy surgery.
Great, yeah. And that happened to you at such a young age. So it's actually pretty inspiring that, at age 13, you not only have to go through the whole process, the surgery, the recovery, living with it, but then it sort of helps you to, I guess, actually maybe mature even faster than most people or other people, right, around the same age. So that's great. At least that's a good positive thing that came out of that. Now, you had the first surgery pretty early. One thing that always comes up when I talk to people that are maybe newly diagnosed or that have been sort of on medications that are not necessarily biologics, they always have this worry about, oh, what if the medication doesn't work? Yes, but there's a lot of options. So you mentioned you were on Remicade earlier, but it really sort of failed after weeks, you said. Were you on other treatments? Did the doctors not want to put you on other treatments? Did you feel like they were not proactive enough? Or did they just tell you, listen, oh, Remicade, it failed after 5 weeks, so there's no bother even trying anything else? Like what happened with your treatments or other treatment options?
I think it's a little different for me at the time because I was living in the Netherlands, and I think the language barrier and the fear of this new diagnosis was hard on my parents. So that's why we got so many different opinions. Remicade at the time was the first line drug for IBD, to my knowledge. And we did try it a couple times after that, but even after every infusion, I never got better. So when we came back to the States, well, actually, when they first mentioned surgery back in London, my parents freaked out. Every parent would freak out if their child had to get surgery. But we went back to the States and they put me on an MPO diet, nothing to eat, and let me be on bowel rest. And then they're like, okay, well, there's certain things that we can do because surgery is, again, sometimes a last resort. So they ended up putting me on Humira injections. I was on methotrexate injections. I was on different pills prior to the Netherlands as well, but I wasn't on them for long. And then even after my first surgery, I was on several injections after that. So I did try several different medications. But again, the bliss of being ignorant as a child, I kind of was like, okay, I'll do this. Okay, I'll do this. Whatever my parents were like, okay, well, we need to try this. I was trying whichever. But it wasn't until later on that I've been on the same drug. But yes, I did trial many medications, but I guess the fear wasn't there yet of like, oh, this doesn't work because I was running through so many things that I was kind of like, okay, I've accepted that this is such a big transition that I'm just kind of have to go through trial and error.
So that was a period where I'm assuming you were flaring and your symptoms were pretty bad or got to the worst possible stage that you were in. Now, you said you were more of a loner, an introvert, and I think that may have helped you deal better with sort of the isolation, right, surrounding the symptoms of this disease. I always say this helped me as well. I was actually comfortable being alone, but nonetheless, again, you were younger. So in what ways did you deal with this isolation? Or did it not bother you at all?
I think with this condition, I wasn't a quiet child. I wasn't always reserved, but I did enjoy my alone time when I was sick because I didn't have to explain it to anybody. I didn't have to do anything requiring exertion. I got really into art. I painted a lot. I did a lot of drawings. I really turned to artwork because that is such a solo thing that you can do. There was singing and dancing videos that I would do in my room alone, and I would post them on social media embarrassingly, but I enjoyed those times away because I could put how much effort I wanted into it, but still have some kind of interaction. I could show people my art, I could show people the dancing and singing videos, but when I wanted my alone time, I could post it, I could show people, and then I could be like, "Okay, I'm not doing anything else." But I think it definitely having a chronic illness has stunted me socially and emotionally back then, and it was hard to keep up with people my age. So I did turn to artwork and singing and dancing on my own. But eventually, once I started feeling better, I was able to catch up and kind of do more physical things, like joining my dance team, but taking it at my own pace. Obviously, adults knew that I had a condition at that time, so I was kind of just do whatever I needed to do to feel better.
Yeah, so you basically were spending that little energy that you had on yourself and yourself only, right? Which is what I always say, the selfishness that we need when we are flaring or we're in a bad condition now. So what's interesting about your story is that you passed through many physicians' offices, specialist appointments, and I always say that for somebody with active disease, or even when you're in remission, that sort of a connection or relationship with a gastroenterologist, especially, is extremely important to have somebody who's proactive. Is this something that you actually ever experienced, seeing all these different doctors, or did you at one point have a doctor that you could stick with, right, and build that kind of a relationship with, or not really?
After the Netherlands, when I was, brought back to the States, we did go to Walter Reed, Medical Center that is near me now, and the pediatric gastroenterologist that took me on at the time, he was a fellow, so in his last year before he was an attending, he really took a strong hold of my case, and we he I mean, he I how often that I saw him and how difficult my case was when I was presented to him, um, we grew such a connection. I was very, resistant against him because I was a child, but even now, I still have a strong connection with him. He was a pediatric gastroenterologist, so it was difficult when I did have to transition to adulthood and no longer have him as a doctor. I'm not gonna lie, it has been kinda difficult as an adult to establish a connection with a gastroenterologist at this age. I think that I have found one that has been communicative, but I definitely don't see them as often as I did my pediatric gastroenterologist, and I think that's just how I'm learning that's how things work, but I do think it is important to at least have yearly checkups with your GI, and if you can establish that rapport, I think it will take more from the patient on that part, especially as an adult, but it is good to have someone that knows your case, especially if it is something that you've dealt with for a long time and have gone through several medications.
So great. I think that was a pretty good summary about what you went through. Let's transition to today. Earlier, you mentioned you're feeling great, but I would love for you to delve a little bit deeper on this. Tell me today, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. There's still that deep-seated fear of, one day I might not feel good. I am currently on one medication that has been helping me for a couple of years. And back to your original questions earlier, there is a fear that it will stop working. And I still hopefully have so much life to live that there are different complications that can come up. But right now, how I'm feeling day to day is amazing. I couldn't have asked for a better, turnout, but I'm hoping to continue that.
You touched on something very briefly there, and I would like to go a little bit deeper there as well, because there's certain misconceptions around ostomies as well that like, hey, once you have surgery, you're cured. You don't have an intestine anymore. There's nothing to worry about. But that's not always the case. So you mentioned you're on medication. Can you quickly take us through why you are on that medication? What is that medication? And then at the same time, also talk about what your current challenges, if any, you have living with an ostomy.
So, after I had a total colectomy when I was 18, and that's mainly because my disease was in that portion of my intestine at the time. So we thought if we got rid of the colon, at the time, that my disease would kind of mellow out. Unfortunately, that did not happen since I do have Crohn's disease. It can happen anywhere from the mouth to the anus. So I did develop disease in different parts of my digestive tract that was left. So I did have to go back on medication after my total colectomy. I'm currently on Humira injections. I think it's adalimumab is the actual term. I'm on injections every other week. They have been working for the diseased parts of my bowel that's left. And I've been on it since 2018, I believe. I've heard that people have been on it for years. I've also heard that it has not been a drug of choice for other IBD patients. And then personally for me, a different story, having an ostomy. I do believe that having an ostomy has helped my condition immensely, but I do have IBD friends that don't have ostomies, and they still have an incredible life. They still feel great as well. I was just that lucky that I got an ostomy. But, The challenges I think nowadays for having an ostomy is my disease process is more focused on having an ostomy because they can be, a little more difficult to handle on top of already having a chronic illness. So I think my day to day actually focuses more on my ostomy care rather than my IBD because my IBD is kept at bay, luckily, right now by my Humira injections.
So if somebody is potentially facing surgery, potentially facing ostomy, and they're scared, they're worried, what would you tell that person?
I would tell them that it's going to be okay. I believe that having an ostomy for IBD patients does help more than getting an ostomy for different conditions. It gives your bowel a break from where the inflammation is. I don't think that it's a sole intervention. I do think in my case, I did have to go back on medication, but it is a day to day thing. It's a lot of transitioning and practice required with getting an ostomy, but it is totally okay to do anything that you were doing before after surgery with an ostomy. There's nothing that I can't do that I do now that I didn't do before I had an ostomy. So it doesn't limit you at all. It is an adjustment, but it does not limit you.
That's great. So you just mentioned what sort of impact this has on your life. Now I would like to know what sort of impact this has had on you. In other words, what you went through with the Crohn's, with the surgeries, the ostomy, how has this changed you as a person over the years?
I definitely think this condition has made me humble. I've definitely been humble to the fact that life can change very easily and I can be in pain one day and not pain in the other. I think I've become very empathetic with those who are going through the same thing, especially having to go through multiple medications and then ended up needing a surgery. Um, I'm still greedy and needy, how normal people would be in some light, but I do take those moments and see a different side of things because I know that life is not always black and white. There's going to be some areas where you're not going to be able to give your all every day. And that may not pertain to just IBD patients. That's generally how everyone is day to day, that there's something that someone else is going through that you have no idea. They're having silent battles of their own. So I definitely think that gave me perspective having this condition that no one's normal. Everybody has something that is going to knock them down sometimes. And I think that we need to accept people for who they are and what they can give with a grain of salt and know that, no one has control over what happens to them. So I think it's just giving me a different perspective overall.
I always refer to, or in my case, my IBD as a blessing and a curse. Based on what you just said, thinking back, how do you relate to that?
Well, I could not agree with you more for the same reason. For obvious physical conditions, it's a curse, but for the emotional and social aspect of it, it is a blessing. I think being humbled is not necessarily a negative thing. I think that it is helpful to, especially in my line of work right now, to be able to relate and not know any struggles in life. I think knowing the struggles and being able to go through some of the hardships has molded me into the person that I'm proud of today. I don't think that if I didn't go through any hardships or struggles with this condition, I could be a completely different person. And I like the person who I am today. So I'm thankful for the experiences that I have, regardless of what I went through to get there, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. It really, really does. And you touched on it. You touched on what you're doing today because it's very heavily involved with sort of the ostomy world. But before we get to that, in your answer now, you mentioned the social aspect really quickly. So I do want to go back into the past one more time just because I'm interested to see how you navigated this. with what you went through, again, through this crucial period of teenage years when most people, they go dancing to clubs. I mean, you did it in your own room. Great. They date, they have sort of, they go through that natural stage of adolescence and moving into adulthood. So you had a surgery at 18. So how has this affected, you know, this aspect of growing up, like relationships, body image, right? In what ways has this impacted you, and how did you live those moments, at those different ages?
Yeah, well, from a very young age, when my condition was at its worst, I was pooping my pants. Yeah, like, outright, I could not hold it. My condition was so bad that it was just I was running to the bathroom all the time, so body image wise, there was definitely things that I had to think about before going anywhere. Like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't eat that, or is this going to affect me? Where's the nearest bathroom? I think that was such a major part of my life that I had some social anxiety of like, if I were to poop my pants, where can I run to first? Like, what clothing should I bring? And then later on, when I got my first ostomy, it was, oh, like, are people gonna be able to notice it through my clothes? Am I going to be able to sit down crisscross or, like, general day-to-day stuff, like, that you don't second guess, I guess? I was thinking about, like, how are people going to view me? I it was and even today, I'm still, how are people going to view me? But I think it came with time and exception that, okay, maybe people don't notice my ostomy. People don't notice my stomach gurgling. People don't notice how often I'm going to the bathroom. And if they did, it was kind of like, well, I don't know, I've dealt with it for this long, people go to the bathroom. I kind of just accepted, like, everybody's poop stinks. Everybody goes to the bathroom. I just go a little bit more. And then I guess romantic relationship wise, I was very private initially. It wasn't until later in life that I did share more of that stuff, because I feel like in relationships, that is one of the harder things to talk about is, intimacy and toileting. But over time, again, with the other things, I kind of just adjusted to, it is what it is. Everyone poops and pees. Everyone goes to the bathroom. People wear different clothing. It doesn't mean that you're, less than, more than, anything like that. So it took a lot of exception on my part to be comfortable with, one, my condition and how my body image was, but it did take time and it did take a lot of reassurance as well. Even today, reassurance is great for me, but having those people that do reassure you in your life and acceptance that, like, it is what it is, definitely helped me get through most relationships in my life.
Yeah. So just listening to this again, yes, absolutely. This is not necessarily dinner talk, but and you said poop, which was, very, very nice, but it's okay. This is a podcast, so we can use explicit language. It's true. Everyone shits. And that's just the lesson here, I mean, again, no need to talk about it all the time, but it's completely fine because everybody can relate to it. So it's okay. So I don't want to, with my next question, I don't want to spoil it. So I'm going to let you answer it because not only do you live with an ostomy, but you really carried this through into your professional life. Tell us what you do today, what that entails, and most importantly, I would love to know, how did you get into that field? What made you want to do this?
Well, I am a certified ostomy nurse, and I have been in this role about a year now, working as an ostomy nurse. Prior to this, actually, I was a GI nurse working in endoscopy, so both sides of the condition. I think it's not hard to conclude that my condition and my ostomy led me to want to work with patients that have these conditions. I think it's very fulfilling and rewarding to come in contact with other people that are like me. Again, that's the reassurance part. I really enjoy seeing patients that have kind of gone through what I've gone through. But ever since I actually had my first GI nurse in the hospital, I've been like, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to be her. And she was this little Filipino lady who worked in a big military hospital, and she was so blunt. And at times I did not like her for that, but it definitely shaped me into what I wanted to do. So I got my bachelor's in nursing. I made a plan. I was like, I'm going to do this by this time at this date. I knew I wanted to be in the GI field, but since I had an ostomy, I was leaning more towards ostomy patients who don't necessarily always get an ostomy for IBD reasons. So I worked as a nurse for 1 year. I actually went into endoscopy and worked there for 2 years. Absolutely loved it. Loved the procedural part of it. And then went back to school to get my certifications for wound, ostomy, and continence nursing. And then I ended up getting a job at my hospital working with inpatients, from neonates to geriatric population who have ostomies for a plethora of reasons. But it's been very rewarding and very fulfilling.
And so right now in your current position, take us through a day in the life of Leah. What is it that you do? What are your responsibilities?
So, as an ostomy nurse, I do have like a list of patients. We, believe it or not, there are at least two patients getting an ostomy a day. So we will have ostomy patients that are straight out of the OR, day one post op, who we have to go and say, hey, this is your life now. How, like, this is how you live with an ostomy. And so we see patients from post op day one up until they're discharged, and we teach them the basics of ostomy care, how to live day to day, how to change their bag, how to empty their bag, how to adjust their diet and hydration around having an ostomy. And we see them up until discharge. And then, unfortunately, I don't get to see the post op, but there are patients every day that, I see, or I see in the future that come back and they're like, yeah, I'm dealing with it just fine. Like it ended up being, no big deal. There's definitely patients that don't handle it that way, and it is very hard. I did have one particular patient that did not have an ostomy for IBD reasons, but nevertheless was a huge change in their life. And I think the connotation around ostomies is so negative usually, that it is an even bigger adjustment when you have that mindset to having an ostomy. But he made such an incredible turnaround, being able to help people accept this as part of their life and their day to day, and say, hey, like, it's you can take a break. Like, this is a lot of information. This is a lot that you're going through. You have other things to worry about, but we're for this hour, we're gonna focus on this and then continue your day to day. So it's really just a lot of emotional support as well as physical and like educational support.
That's really great. And in connection to that, earlier, I asked Leah, the patient, to sort of offer some words of advice to people that might face an ostomy, right, or that just had surgery. I'll ask you this again, but slightly different. Now, as Leah, the professional, when you see people with ostomies, there's leaks sometimes, there's skin irritations, rashes, right, frustrations that pop up left and right. And sometimes I think it really affects people from a mental point of view as well. What words of encouragement do you have for people sort of navigating daily struggles with ostomies?
It's a big feat for sure, because everyone's different, everyone handles things differently. I kind of do it the personal way of things. I don't openly share about my ostomy unless it's appropriate. Like, at least if I know that they're mentally there to accept that information, I will tell them. But I tell them without telling them. I know that this is a lot. I know that you're dealing with a lot of things, and a lot of things are happening, complications that you weren't expecting coming with an ostomy. But there are ways to mitigate these things. There are ways to treat these things. And as long as, if the patients are in the hospital long enough, we can teach them a lot of things. But basic ostomy care, those first few days after surgery, is just knowing how to protect their skin, knowing how to prevent leaks, and knowing how to keep a pouch on. It is very fast, but I would let patients know that there's so many resources out there, IBD population or just ostomy population. So many people, including myself, like do different things that are out of the norm, but that work for them. So professionally, I say it's a lot. I know. Take a breath. I acknowledge that it is a big thing and it is a big adjustment in your life to accept, but this is your life now, and we do have to focus on what is going on right now. So it's kind of like a tough love thing. Like, I get that this is a lot for you, but this is what we got to do. And the sooner that they accept it, the better. It does take longer than others, but it is just kind of a you're going to be okay, but this is how life is going to be right now. And sometimes people don't have ostomies permanently, some get them reversed. So that we don't try to bring that up because that might be false hope. But if we can, we kind of shed a little bit of light on the future.
So you're spending your days in and out basically offering guidance to patients. However, there's a whole population out there that is not necessarily physically affected by ostomies or by IBD. However, they are supporting someone with IBD or an ostomy. They're in love with somebody who has an ostomy or IBD. What kind of advice do you have for friends, for family members, for partners supporting someone with IBD or someone with an ostomy?
There was a very good article that my mom sent me a very while back when I was like teenage years. That's covers how to love someone with Crohn's disease. So specifically my condition, but IBD in general. And a lot of the article touched on a lot of people will suffer in silence. There's a lot of things that they will want to do for themselves. And although they may look like they're struggling doing it, sometimes, as we've talked before, it is a comfort for that alone time to figure things out for yourself. So I think if you love someone in your life or are caring for someone in your life with an ostomy or IBD, it's going to be hard, but you have to give them space to accept and to work through the condition because it is something that is happening to them. So you have to give them grace with what they're going through, whether it's a new diagnosis or a new ostomy. It is such a big adjustment period that I know a lot of people. I even have a best friend that's very like, what do you need? What, like, what can I do? And I'm like, let me just sit with this for a second. I had a situation the other day where my bag leaked at my friend's house right before we were going out, and it has not leaked in a very long time. And she was like, "What can I do? Do you need to change it? Like, do you have supplies? Blah, blah, blah." And I was like, let's slow down here. Like, let me accept the fact that my bag leaked after years. Like, I'm still trying to grasp, like, how did it leak? Or sometimes if my stomach hurts from my condition, sometimes I'm like, why is it hurting? And someone's like, well, what does it feel like? What are you doing? Like, what did you eat? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, let me give me some time, give me some space because it is so overwhelming when some people try to overhelp that you just need some time. So my one piece of advice would be give people a grace period and accept that there's some things that they need to just do themselves to feel physically and mentally okay.
Yeah, that's right. Give them some space, give them some time. Maybe feel free to educate yourself, but make sure you use that newfound knowledge carefully as well, right? You don't want to crush somebody with like facts and figures, and yeah. So that's very good. So we spoke about you speaking to a lot of other people, but if you could go back to the 9-year-old self, potentially even on the day that you were diagnosed, or you received the news that there's something fundamentally wrong, what would you tell yourself?
I don't know if my 9-year-old self would listen to me.
Could be the
If
13 1-year-old, I mean.
yeah. I think it would be nice, if I sat with myself in, like, a quiet place, and I think it's hard to hear that everything will be okay, but knowing that I mean, because my future self knows now that I'm okay, but understanding that, like, again, this is a lot that you're going through. I know that you're in pain, and I know you're questioning, like, "Why is this happening to you?" And it's unfortunate that it did, but I would tell her to be strong and to take it with a grain of salt, to endure what I can, and make sure that I set limits with people who are either trying to tell me things or trying to make me do things. That I have a choice when it comes to medications, procedures, stuff like that. I don't have You don't have to tell people about your condition. You don't have to feel like you have to be 100% all the time. If you're not feeling well, communicate at least that you're not feeling well, something you just it's just not a good day for you, and don't let people push you, and don't let people tell you what is and what isn't. Like, you know your body, you know yourself. It's you who have to live with yourself at the end of the day. So accept what you can. If you can't, just communicate that. I would definitely tell her to communicate better than how I was when I was younger, and just take it day by day. Each day is going to be different. But they're knowing now, I didn't know at the time, there's a lot of other people going through the same thing. So, you know, lean on your peers, lean on your family, and just take time for yourself and just accept kind of what is, and that maybe things will look up someday.
Sometimes this sort of simple reassurance is all the reassurance that humans need. So I think that's great. So my final question for you is about the future. And even though I always say this, it's very difficult to answer. At least all we want to have is hope, right? So do you believe that in our lifetime we will find a cure for IBD?
I think there won't be a cure for one condition. I think that it's going to take probably more than our lifetime to figure out something for everyone's condition, but I do think we are making positive strides, huge strides in the IBD world. I do think that people who have the milder conditions that are, manageable, I think if we catch it early on, I do think that there will be a cure for those people. I do think that IBD is a spectrum, and it ranges. So, yes and no. I think for some people, we definitely can have a cure and mitigate their early stages. More complicated situations, I think, will be a couple years, a little more lifetime.
That's still enough hope for me. So I'll take it, and then we'll see how it goes. And, I agree with you. I think you're absolutely right. And then, of course, on the other part, let's hope that that science will advance quickly enough to help the more serious conditions as well. Well, Leah, thank you so much. This was really great. I love the fact that you're so open about it. I really enjoy your story of going from a 9-year-old who's basically being told that she has this certain condition to somebody who actually works in that same field later on. So that's really, really inspiring. So keep doing that, keep helping people, and keep on singing and dancing, even if it's just in your room, with yourself. I think that is the right spirit to have when we're faced with such adversity. So thank you so much again for being on the show today. It was really a pleasure to talk to you, and I wish you nothing but the best, moving forward.
Thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed this.
That's it for today's episode of Talking Shit, presented by Colitis Unfiltered. I'm Frank Tabering, and if this hit home or hit your gut, do us a favor, subscribe to the show, and follow us at Colitis Unfiltered on YouTube, Substack, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and Reddit. We'll see you soon for more inspiring stories from the bathroom floor.